joining me on the stage are three people who right now are making a significant contribution to our industry right in front of our eyes. Laura Chase is an executive director of web analytics and insights. She's spent almost 20 years in digital analytics, joining the healthcare industry a couple of years ago. She's joined by Anthony Coraggio. He's a digital analytics principal with a background of more than 10 years in the industry, specializing in implementation and integration of compliant web analytics solutions. And finally, Aaron Burnett is the CEO and founder of Wheelhouse Digital Marketing Group, a fast-growing, more than full-service digital marketing agency with deep experience in SEO, digital strategy, digital advertising, conversion rate optimization, and analytics. Please join me in welcoming Laura, Anthony, and Aaron. And Aaron, I'm going to pass the baton to you.
Thanks very much, Lauren. Well, if you're in this session, you're almost certainly aware of the seismic change that took place in December of 2022, when the Department of Health and Human Services issued a bulletin related to HIPAA compliance and use of tracking technologies for digital marketing. And in a moment, digital marketing for healthcare was upended. The regulatory landscape tightened dramatically. Information that previously was foundational and fundamental to the use of analytics and successful execution of digital marketing strategies that previously had been understood to be available to be shared was now considered protected health information. And that protected health information, use of that information now required an agreement called a BAA, a business associate agreement, between a covered entity, a healthcare organization, and the partners or platforms that they were going to use. So out of that came a catch-22, a real conundrum for healthcare marketers. The information they required to do their jobs effectively could only be shared and used under a BAA, and those platform providers don't sign BAAs. Google won't sign a BAA, Meta won't sign a BAA. So they're stuck. Out of an abundance of caution, we've seen everything from healthcare organizations removing all tracking technologies and pixels and flying blind with their marketing. Some have stopped altogether, and some have continued, but in a fairly risky sort of a context. I would like to tell you a story that is much more optimistic than that, and that is the way that we have been able, through our work with a very large healthcare organization, we can move to the next slide. We've been able to work with a very large healthcare organization, very much in keeping with the theme of this conference, to future-proof HIPAA-compliant analytics for healthcare digital marketing. Next slide, please. We are a digital marketing firm, but we engage much more deeply than is typical for a digital marketing firm. We've been working with this very large healthcare system since 2013. And during that time, we've been deeply embedded in the development of their analytics. In fact, we developed and implemented and managed an analytics strategy for a 200-site ecosystem. We helped to attempt to implement a niche HIPAA-compliant analytics solution that was not successful in that particular solution wasn't enterprise ready. And then we also helped to implement an enterprise-scale analytics platform. Having done that, having implemented a couple of analytics platforms over 2 years in an attempt to be very forward-looking and to anticipate and get ahead of HIPAA compliance, we collectively thought, well, 2 analytics platforms over as many years, let's not do that again. And so we were asked a very important question by our partner and our client, which is, can we develop a HIPAA-compliant, platform-agnostic analytics solution? A solution that gave our clients the ability to be certain that they were HIPAA compliant, to avoid vendor lock-in, and to preserve the flexibility and the freedom to continue to execute the critical digital marketing activities that are essential to their operation, and to maintain operational freedom as they need. Our view is that HIPAA-compliant analytics and marketing are not mutually exclusive, and we have created a solution that proves the point, that preserves and creates that freedom that I just discussed. And I want to share with you sort of a conceptual and an architectural view, and then we'll hear from Laura and Anthony who have looked very deeply at this solution, the benefits, the risks, the things to consider if you're looking at a solution like this for your own organization. So any HIPAA compliant analytics solution begins with a server-side implementation. And so that's what we've done in building this solution as well. Where we profoundly diverge from other analytics solution and where control begins in this solution is that we create and implement a private client ID. This is a client ID that takes the place of all analytics script and all tracking pixels on the client site and becomes the only means by which user data is collected. This flips the conventional paradigm for user data collection on its head. Typically, you're dealing with a tracking pixel that is provided by a third party. In healthcare, sort of most egregiously, or in the riskiest context, a pixel provided by Meta. The data that is collected through that pixel is governed by a third-party data library. We change that completely and create a private client ID, and the data that is collected is positively defined in concert with compliance and marketing in the healthcare organization, so that only what they specify is collected through that private client ID. We then add and integrate cookie consent and monitoring. If that doesn't already exist, if it does, we integrate it so that it's sensitive to the various regulatory environments in different geographies in which the healthcare organization operates. It was great to see OneTrust earlier. We have consistently used OneTrust and love the way they work and love their functionality. And we build on that with URL cleansing logic that ensures that no sensitive information is passed in URLs to third-party platforms. One of the things that was a profound change and clarification in that guidance from HHS is that they now stipulated that the mere fact that a user visits a page that pertains to a treatment or a health condition can be considered PHI and can't be shared with a third-party platform without a BAA. So if you're using Google Analytics, for example, you can't share URL data with Google Analytics. There's no capacity in Google Analytics, though, to cleanse that data. And so what we have done here is to create absolute control for healthcare organizations to ensure that the only thing that's passed is clean data. We replace that URL information with a hash. That hash has meaning and can be interpreted by the marketing organization with our clients, but it has no meaning to a third-party platform. And so we maintain HIPAA compliance in that way. We add injection blocking, which protects against any unintended data collection. A real-world example here may be a content marketer who posts a TED Talk to a blog. Well, a TED Talk comes with its own analytics payload. We scan for that analytics payload and we block it, ensuring that no information is collected and shared that shouldn't be. And then, critically, we use Telium Event Stream as a second layer of data verification and as a data hub. It is fantastic that Telium has been working in healthcare for so many years and has a HIPAA compliant solution. And like Wheelhouse is willing to sign BAAs with healthcare clients. And so this really is the only solution that we can use to facilitate this HIPAA compliant analytics architecture. I'll take you through now kind of an architectural view and a data flow. Starting left to right, again, everything starts with that private client ID, which replaces all tracking technology that would previously would have been on the site. The only data that is collected is governed by a private analytics library that is defined with our healthcare client. Data that is collected is passed in a private data session to Event Stream. And in the context of Event Stream, we then introduce URL cleansing logic, as described, and injection blocking. And then we add fine-grained, very detailed control of what is shared for each platform and partner with which a healthcare organization works. So if a healthcare organization has their own CDP, we can pass full data to that internal CDP. But for every other external partner, we control down to a single data attribute level. So that, for example, in the case of pay-per-click advertising via Google Ads, we simply send a binary signal. There was or there was not a conversion. We don't send any URL data. We don't send user journey information. We retain and block everything that is PHI, but we pass enough information so that that campaign can be effectively executed and optimized by the digital marketers involved. In similar fashion, we pass only clean data to an analytics platform. And as a consequence, we don't require our healthcare clients to change analytics platforms or the interfaces with which they're familiar or the reports that they use. We simply create a context in which any analytics platform can be made HIPAA compliant. And we can do the same thing with any number of advertising partners, analytics platforms, infrastructure, and partners. With that, I will pause and I'll turn it over to people who are much more deeply expert than I. Anthony, let's start with you. I know that you have looked very deeply at this architecture and have some fairly strongly held opinions on it. Talk to us about the benefits and maybe the drawbacks, the risks that are associated with implementing an architecture like this.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. So I think there are a lot of advantages here from a technical perspective. Obviously, having a solid vetted approach with compliance really built in while you're navigating and ever developing analytics needs across, say, diverse web applications, if you've got different stacks on different sites to deal with. I think it's really important to consider the time savings also in that perspective. And just from the perspective of managing technical resources, just getting to the point of doing the work can be really hard at times when compliance and governance is a big challenge. And whether things are changing on the front end or downstream platforms receiving data, I would say being able to actually demonstrate a relatively consistent architecture with confident answers for all the compliance questions that need to be cleared from a data collection perspective is really tremendously valuable. Obviously, there has to be configurability and customizability based on, say, the particular technologies you're working with or policy changes that might be happening. And this sort of build also gives a lot of latitude to make modifications in dealing with that. So, if you're really managing to a high degree of customization, what you're building into the front end or what you're choosing to implement in terms of mapping logic, stay consistent with those, you're able to do things that aren't always possible with traditional client-side analytics implementations where, sure, there is a lot you can do with those, but there are also some very particular things that you cannot alter that are simply, it's third-party code. I'd also say somewhat to Aaron's point on compliance and measurement not being mutually exclusive, developing an approach like this really can mean life or death for certain marketing functions like search advertising when you have a very conservative compliance regime. I think to the point of, so I say search advertising, if you can snag a GCL ID from the query string and use audience string to associate that with a compliant conversion flag, and that's all that you're sending off to Google Ads, you don't need to worry about dropping Google code on your site anymore. It's really fantastic stuff to be able to work with. I'd say as far as things that can be challenging, it is important to consider that there is some substantial custom work represented in an architecture of this nature, particularly when you have a complex enterprise stack and you're dealing with owning your own identifiers. I think that is true, as you know, of any analytics implementation, especially in that sort of environment where you have many domains that you're going between and different stacks that you're dealing with. That will even break your base Google Analytics stuff that you might have run for years. So this does mean venturing, though, outside of kind of your conventional cookbook, client-side Google or Adobe solutions, for example. Not everyone has worked with like a client-to-server or server-side architecture. And there's some uncommon knowledge there to develop in a team. I think, not to say that it's like uniquely challenging, but it's just something that a lot of people, even if they've been working with analytics for a while or in digital marketing for a while, may not have encountered before. And it's a bit of a paradigm shift to say like, oh, this is how it works now instead of the other way that we've done it previously. But that is really, of course, where the tools that Telium has and the expertise in engineering from an organization like Wheelhouse becomes really valuable in easing the way to get there. I would also say there's some things that are going to be limited, right? In this case, by design, right? So, for example, if you're kind of going back to your traditional client-side tagging perspective, we're sending a user's IP on into Google or Adobe Analytics, as those client-side tags would do, effectively force you to do without a BAA. It's not something that we're going to do when we're taking this kind of approach. So that does mean, apart from a compliance win, it does also mean building and managing your own business applicable definitions of, say, geography, like a geo report that's generated based off an IP. Instead of just getting that simple report out, you need to think about what are you going to be able to capture and why. Like, you can't say, like, zoom down to, like, this is this person's particular zip code, for example, but what city or service region do they live in? I see that not necessarily just as a limitation, though, but really something that is about consistency with the philosophy of our work. I would say in a healthcare context, I very much believe we're not about extracting all possible data from consumers to optimize profit, but we're really carefully determining necessary and sufficient information to progress a helpful experience for patients and for potential patients and really grow an organization in service to them. And for me, I think that's really key to what this kind of approach is about. It's really not just trying to work around what the government might be forcing you to do, but what is the right thing to do for how you are serving your community and what your organization is about.
Great points, Anthony. Thank you. And Laura, I know you're in a leadership role. What's important to consider from an organizational perspective if you're going to implement this sort of architectural change?
Yeah, no, and I think that's the key, that you're talking to your business leadership and you're talking to your stakeholders about. This isn't a tool change. This isn't finding tools that will sign a BA. This is an architectural change that will allow you to solve the use cases of what is the tool that I need. So rather being kind of pigeonholed into the available tools that may sign a BAA, now you can say, hey, what is the use case that my organization has? Does my organization need a tool that's a WYSIWYG? Does my organization need a tool that's more product-based? Does my organization, so you're able to choose a tool based on what your organization needs. It also really helps staying vendor agnostic. So once you own your own visitor ID and you're pushing data to whichever tool you want, so now you've got a plug in or unplug approach. Once a vendor no longer meets your needs, you can unplug from that and plug into another tool relatively easy without disrupting your entire data collection. So I think that staying vendor agnostic definitely helps when you're talking to leadership, saying, hey, we don't want to be necessarily locked in with a vendor, locked into a long-term contract, or once we've implemented, if we're using their visitor ID, we're stuck. And also from a compliance perspective, and even outside of healthcare, to be honest, like that relationship was with you and your customer. That relationship on your website isn't between your customer and Google. It isn't between your customer and Adobe or your customer and Meta. It's between you and that customer. So that's where that trust lives. And so if you're owning your own visitor ID as well, now you have a client-side ID that you're able to push into the back end instead of exposing your back-end ID to the front end. Now you're owning that. So you can push it into the tools that you need to, so you could map your data afterwards. So I want to say that those are a lot of the arguments. And then honestly, it's being able to, this allows you to monitor your data much more closely. And so if you're able to send to your leadership team, hey, this is where we're at with compliance, and you're monitoring, here's our data quality, and sending those reports of data quality is moving up and to the right. Compliance issues, as they crop up, websites evolve, you're able to quash those immediately. And so that's kind of the big wins that you can promise with your leadership team.
Yeah, great points. The last speaker made a really good point about just thinking in terms of an 18-month time horizon, not attempting to build for the next 5 years. And one of the things that we've tried to achieve, I think have achieved with this architecture and the solution, is that it can be very easily updated and adapted. So data collection libraries can be updated very easily as the regulatory environment changes, or compliance interpretation of the regulatory environment changes, as can URL cleansing, as can sharing with platforms and partners. So we've tried to build that that flexibility in to anticipate the changing environment. Laura, what do you think is on the horizon regarding data privacy and HIPAA compliance and its implications for digital marketing?
Yeah, no, I think a lot of things. And I think this really enables it. Where I would love to see things go, again, it goes back to if you're owning your own visitor ID, you're able to push this into all MarTech. You own your own front end ID. It doesn't have to stop at analytics or marketing or anything. You could push it into your personalization tool. You could push it into your testing tool. So now you've got that visitor level integration between all of your tools. And so now you're owning that rather than letting third parties own that in different places. So that's one area I could see being really, really cool. And then also as the environment changes, it's pretty easy and adaptable to be able to plug and play saying, oh, we're gonna change that variable. We're not going to share that. Or wait a second, right data, right tool. Maybe my analytics tool doesn't need all of that data. I need it in a different tool. So it's really configuring the right data, the right tool. And also, if I've got more ownership over that data, I can send it into my backend. I can marry it up with the data that I need to, but I don't have to expose that to any of my third parties.
That's great. Excellent points from both of you. Thank you very much for spending time with us and for your expert opinions.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
And thank you.